students. This video we are going to start with a question which often comes in the minds of many people. Why exactly we feel fresh and energetic after drinking tea, right? For understanding why exactly we feel fresh and energetic after drinking tea, we need to understand first of all why exactly we feel tired, right? For understanding the mechanism of why exactly we feel tired, we have to understand it in a step-by-step manner, right? So let's start, right? So our brain, right, it just constitutes like 2% of the body weight, right? But it still consumes like 20% of the energy, right? And where exactly this energy is being utilized? In the generation of action potential, in synaptic transmission, release of all those neurotransmitters, right? So despite being just 2% of body weight, it consumes like 20% of the energy, right? And where this energy is coming from? This energy is coming from ATP, right? So this ATP will get hydrolyzed, right? With the help of which enzyme? ATPase, right? It will break down into ADP plus PI, right? This ADP plus PI, this will undergo further hydrolysis with the help of adenylate cyclase, right? This will form our AMP. AMP will further undergo hydrolysis, 5-nucleotidase, finally we will get our chemical called adenosine, right? Now this adenosine will act on our neurons, right? It will act on our neurons. On which receptor? On A1 receptors, right? It will act on A1 receptor. And this A1 receptor is actually a G protein coupled receptor, right? It is coupled to a G protein, GI/O, right? What this will do, that this will reduce the level of enzyme adenyl cyclase, right? This will reduce the level of enzyme adenyl cyclase. Now if the level of adenyl cyclase reduces, right, then what it can further lead to? It will reduce the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. The conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP will be reduced, right? If cyclic AMP is reduced, it is going to reduce the pKa, protein kinase A, right? Now all this process will ultimately lead to opening of G protein gated potassium channels, right? G protein gated inner rectifying potassium channels, which we call GIRK, right? G protein gated inner rectifying potassium channels. So what is going to happen? These potassium ions are going to move out from these ion channels. Now suppose if positive charge is moving out of these ion channels, then what is going to happen? This side will become negative, right? And the outer side will become positive. This side will become negative, outer side will become positive, right? As we have seen that if a positive charge is moving outside, the inside will become negative and the outside will become positive. And what does this mean? This means that our neuron will become hyperpolarized. It becomes hyperpolarized. Now what hyperpolarized means? Now the neurons have become less excitable, right? It has moved away from depolarization. For the cell to become excitable, more positive charge should move inside, right? But since the positive charge is moving outside, right, cell has become hyperpolarized, less excitable. Hyperpolarized is a kind of neural equivalent of getting tired. When you are tired, you don't want to do anything. So when nerve cells become hyperpolarized, right, it's very tough to excite them, right? Now, on this side, we have got voltage gated calcium channels, right? But for these voltage gated calcium channels to open up, right? For our voltage gated calcium channels to open up, this neuron need to depolarize. Depolarize up to what level? The normal resting potential of neuron is like minus 90 millivolt, right? It needs to depolarize all the way up to minus 40 millivolt for these calcium ion channels to open up, right? Now, instead of depolarizing, it has become hyperpolarized. That means it has moved away from the point of minus 40 millivolt, right? So these calcium gated ion channels, these voltage gated calcium channels won't open, right? So your calcium, which should move in, won't move inside, right? If these calcium ions won't move inside, then all these vesicles, right? All these vesicles which require calcium for its exocytosis won't fuse with the membrane, and there won't be any exocytosis, right? If there is not enough exocytosis, right, suppose this is glutamate hormone, then the level of glutamate, which is excitatory hormone, is going to decrease. Right? So how adenosine decreases your glutamate level? Right? Adenosine will act on your A1 receptor, right, which is coupled with G protein. It is going to reduce adenyl cyclase. So less ATP will be converted to cyclic AMP. Less cyclic AMP means less pKa. All this will lead to opening up of G protein gated inner rectifying potassium channels. So potassium channels will move outside. So your nerve cell will become hyperpolarized. If this becomes hyperpolarized, then the calcium channels, which needs actually depolarization for it to open, the calcium won't move inside. If calcium doesn't move inside, these vesicles won't fuse with the membrane. If these vesicles don't fuse with the membrane, then any neurotransmitter which is excreted out, for example glutamate, will get reduced. If glutamate is get reduced, right, you will of course feel drowsy, because glutamate is a excitatory neurotransmitter. Same stands true for other hormones like your serotonin and acetylcholine. Right? Now, how adenosine acts on various regions of brain, right? This adenosine is going to act on your basal forebrain area, right? After acting on the basal forebrain area, it is going to inhibit the cholinergic neurons, which supply all over to the cortex and keep it stimulated, right? After giving inhibitory signals to basal forebrain area, it is going to inhibit cholinergic neurons projecting to cortex. Which are going to cortex, right? What else? This adenosine is also going to inhibit your striatum, right? It is going to inhibit the striatum area, right? After acting on the striatum, it is going to inhibit the dopaminergic pathway, right? It will inhibit dopaminergic pathway. Actually, it acts on the A2A receptors in the striatum, right? I will explain. It's a two-step mechanism, right? It is going to inhibit dopaminergic pathway. right? Now, how adenosine actually inhibits dopaminergic pathway, I'll just explain with the help of a cell over here. We'll draw a small cell of striatum, right? Now it has got co-expression of two receptors. One is A2A, on which the adenosine acts, right? Other is your D2 receptor, right? When adenosine acts on the A2A receptors of the striatum, right, it actually increases the level of adenyl cyclase, right? So this increases the level of cyclic AMP. It will increase the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP, which is going to increase the level of pKa, and this pKa is actually going to inhibit this dopamine receptor. So dopamine won't be able to come and bind to this receptor, right? So it indirectly inhibits your dopaminergic pathway, right? Adenosine will also act on your hippocampus, right? It will inhibit the hippocampal area, and this will lead to what we say cognitive fatigue, right? Right? Then adenosine is also going to inhibit your lateral hypothalamus, right? By inhibiting the lateral hypothalamus, it is going to inhibit the orexin and hypocretin pathway, which deals with motivation, right? It is going to inhibit orexin and hypocretin pathway. This deals with motivation. So when you get tired, you are not motivated enough also, right? And this dopaminergic pathway deals with drive of doing things. You lose the drive. When you get tired, you lose the drive, and you also lose the motivation, right? This deals with drive of doing something, right? Apart from that, adenosine, this inhibition, apart from that, adenosine can also inhibit your tubulomammillary nucleus, right? It can inhibit tubulomammillary nucleus, this point, right? By inhibiting the tubulomammillary nucleus, it is going to inhibit the level of histamine, right? It is going to inhibit the level of histamine. So we can say when we drink tea, the histamine level rises. But adenosine reduces the level of histamine by acting on this tubulomammillary nucleus, right? Apart from that, your it is going to act on this nucleus over here, right? This nucleus near the brainstem, right? Mesopontine tegmentum, right? It will act on the mesopontine tegmentum, right? And it will inhibit the cholinergic pathway going all the way up to brain, right? By acting on the mesopontine tegmentum, it will inhibit the cholinergic neurons. Right? So let me label these areas, right? What adenosine is going to inhibit? First, it is going to inhibit your basal forebrain area, right? Basal forebrain. And what it will inhibit? It will inhibit the cholinergic fibers going all the way up to cortex, right? Then it is going to inhibit your striatum, right? Striatum, let me label striatum, right? Then it is going to inhibit your hippocampus, leading to cognitive fatigue. Hippocampus. Right? Then it is going to inhibit your lateral hypothalamus. Let me label it lateral hypothalamus, the hypocretin and orexin pathway, which controls motivation. Right? Then tubulomammillary nucleus, right? By inhibiting this, it inhibits the level of histamine, right? And last, your this nucleus which is there in the brainstem, right? Mesopontine tegmentum. Okay, so now let's sum it up. No, before summing it up, how exactly the T works, right? The T is going to act on this receptor A1, right? So which is our active compound in T? The active compound in T which exerts its effect is caffeine, right? So what caffeine is going to do, right? The caffeine is going to come and competitively and reversibly, of course, right? Competitively and reversibly going to bind with this receptor, right? So the caffeine is going to come and competitively and reversibly bind with this receptor. So adenosine won't be able to bind to the receptor. If adenosine doesn't bind, your adenyl cyclase level is going to increase, right? Your cyclic AMP level is going to increase. Your pKa level is going to increase. If all these levels increase, this G protein coupled inward rectifying potassium channel is going to close. If this channel closes, the potassium is going to accumulate inside. If potassium accumulates inside, right, this will become depolarized and these calcium channels will open up. If these calcium channels open up, right, these vesicles are going to fuse to the membrane and you will have glutamate, serotonin and acetylcholine. And caffeine, right, is also going to stop, by action on the receptors, is going to stop all the inhibitory influence of adenosine on the various cells, right? It will stop the inhibition of basal forebrain, it will stop the inhibition of striatum, it will stop the inhibition of hippocampus, it will stop the inhibition of lateral hypothalamus, it will stop the inhibition of tubulomammillary nucleus and mesopontine tegmentum. All these inhibitions, right, will be stopped by the caffeine, right? So caffeine is going to competitively block, right? Competitive reversible inhibition, caffeine, right? Competitive, and main point is reversible inhibition. Right? As simple as that, the caffeine is competitively blocking your adenosine receptors, which reverses all the effect exerted by adenosine, right? So now let's sum it up, right? So why exactly we feel fresh and energetic after drinking tea? For that we need to understand why exactly we feel tired at the first place. Lot of energy is being consumed by brain by generation of action potential, synaptic transmission, right? And all that energy is coming from ATP, right? This ATP is being lysed into ADP plus PI, which is further the adenylate cyclase is acting, right? This is kinase actually. Right. Adenylate kinase is acting, right? And this is leading to conversion of ADP to AMP, right? And this AMP will get converted into adenosine, right? Finally, the adenosine is going to exert our effect by acting on your A1 receptors. By acting on A1 receptors, it is going to reduce the level of adenyl cyclase. If it reduces the level of adenyl cyclase, right, ATP will less ATP will get converted to cyclic AMP. So the level of cyclic AMP is going to reduce, level of pKa is going to reduce. If level of pKa reduces, right, your potassium ion channels, right, G protein gated inner rectifying potassium ion channels are going to open up. If they open up, right, the cell is going to hyperpolarize, right? If the cell hyperpolarizes, right, the calcium ion channels voltage gated, which depends on depolarization of cell for them to open up, won't open up, right? If these calcium ions won't move inside, these vesicles won't be released, right, leading to less secretion of glutamate, serotonin or acetylcholine, right? Now, what are the brain areas on which adenosine acts? Adenosine acts on the basal forebrain, right, and inhibits your cholinergic neurons. Next, the adenosine acts on striatum and inhibits the dopaminergic pathway indirectly by acting on the A2A receptors, right, which increases the level of adenylate cyclase. The ATP gets converted, more ATP gets converted to cyclic AMP, more pKa, which inhibits the D2 receptors. So dopamine won't be able to act on the D2 receptors, right? Okay. Now, apart from that, the adenosine is also going to act on lateral hypothalamus and inhibits orexin and hypocretin pathway, which deals with motivation, right? Apart from that, adenosine is also going to inhibit your tubulomammillary nucleus, right, which will reduce the level of histamine. Apart from that, adenosine is also going to inhibit, right, your hippocampus, which will lead to cognitive fatigue, right? Apart from that, adenosine will also inhibit your mesopontine nucleus, right, which is going to inhibit all the ascending cholinergic pathway stimulating the cortex, right? So all these effects are done by adenosine. And how T leads to reversal of those effects? T actually do competitive reversible inhibition of adenosine receptors. It will bind to A1 receptors, it will also bind to A2A receptors, and all the effect exerted by adenosine on the various brain areas are going to get reversed, right? Okay, so hopefully this video has helped you in better understanding of why exactly drinking tea makes us feel fresh and energetic, right, and how exactly adenosine produces the feeling of tiredness, right? Wish you all the very best. Thank you.